Marcus Bennett stood at the window of his corner office on the 42nd floor, watching the autumn rain streak down the glass like tears against the Chicago skyline. At 38, he had everything a man could want: a thriving tech company valued at $3 billion, a penthouse in the Gold Coast, and enough money to last several lifetimes. Yet the reflection staring back at him looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than they should be for someone his age. "Mr. Bennett," the soft voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Your 3 o'clock with the investors is in 10 minutes. He turned to find Olivia Morrison standing in the doorway, tablet in hand, looking as composed and professional as always. For 2 years, she had been his executive assistant, and he honestly didn't know how he'd managed before her. Where others saw endless meetings and impossible schedules, she saw patterns and solutions. She had a mind like a steel trap and a work ethic that rivaled his own. "Thank you, Olivia." He moved toward his desk, then paused. "Actually, before that meeting, there's something I need to ask you." She stepped fully into the office, her navy blue dress suit crisp despite it being late afternoon. Her dark blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her hazel eyes held that look of quiet competence that he'd come to rely on. "Of course." "What do you need?" Marcus found himself uncharacteristically hesitant. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but this simple request felt loaded with complications he hadn't fully considered. The Children's Heart Foundation is hosting their annual charity auction next Saturday evening. It's their biggest fundraiser of the year. "Yes, I have it in your calendar," Olivia replied. "I've already arranged for your donation check and confirmed your attendance." "Right." He ran a hand through his dark hair, a nervous gesture he'd never quite managed to eliminate. "The thing is, it's expected that I bring a guest. Someone who can help represent the company and speak intelligently about our charitable initiatives." Olivia's expression remained neutral, but he saw her fingers tighten slightly on her tablet. "Would you like me to call Ms. Whitmore? She's attended events with you before." "God, no!" The words came out more forcefully than he intended. Cassandra Whitmore was exactly the kind of person he was trying to avoid. Beautiful, polished, and completely focused on status and connections. "I was actually hoping you might consider attending with me." The silence that followed felt heavy. Olivia's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in her professional composure. "I'm not sure that would be appropriate, Mr. Bennett. I'm your assistant." "Which is exactly why you'd be perfect," he said, warming to the idea even as he spoke. "You know more about our charitable work than anyone. You helped design our mentorship program, and you've been instrumental in our foundation's success. Plus, you understand the business side without treating every conversation like a networking opportunity." She studied him for a long moment, and he found himself noticing details he'd somehow overlooked before, the way a few strands of hair had escaped her ponytail, the intelligence shining in her eyes, the grace in how she held herself, despite coming from what he knew was a modest background. "Mr. Bennett, I appreciate the offer, but events like this, they're not my world. I'd be out of my depth with your friends and business associates." "Then we'll navigate it together," he said softly. "I'm not asking you to be anyone but yourself, Olivia." "That's more than enough." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. She glanced at her own device. "Your investors are waiting in the conference room." "Right." He straightened his tie. "Think about it, please?" She nodded, though her expression suggested she was already overthinking every possible complication. As she turned to leave, Marcus couldn't help but wonder if he'd just made a brilliant decision or a catastrophic mistake. Later that evening, Marcus met his longtime friends Trevor Walsh and Brandon Cole at their usual spot, an exclusive steakhouse where the cheapest bottle of wine cost more than most people's monthly rent. Both men had inherited their wealth and spent their days managing trust funds and investment portfolios between golf games and social events. "So, who's the unlucky woman for Saturday's torture session?" Brandon asked, cutting into his ribeye with the casual confidence of someone who'd never worried about money a day in his life. Marcus took a sip of his bourbon before answering. "I've asked Olivia to accompany me." Trevor nearly choked on his wine. "Your assistant?" "Marcus, tell me you're joking." "Why would I be joking?" Marcus kept his voice level, though he could feel his jaw tightening. Because the Pembroke charity auction is the social event of the fall, Brandon said, leaning forward with that condescending expression Marcus had learned to hate over the years. Every major player in Chicago business will be there. Senators, tech moguls, old money families. And you want to bring your secretary? Executive assistant, Marcus corrected sharply. And yes, I do. Trevor shook his head with a laugh that grated on Marcus's nerves. Look, I'm sure Olivia is great at scheduling meetings and answering phones, but she's going to be completely out of her element. These events have unspoken rules, social protocols that take years to learn. She probably bought her dress at a department store and has no idea which fork to use for the salad course. You're being a snob, Marcus said flatly. I'm being realistic, Trevor countered. Olivia seems nice enough, but she's not equipped for this kind of event. You'll spend the entire evening explaining basic etiquette instead of making the connections that actually matter. Brandon nodded agreement. Cassandra Whitmore has been dropping hints for weeks that she's available. Her family owns half the commercial real estate in the Loop, and she actually knows how to handle herself at these things. She understands your world. Cassandra is everything wrong with my world, Marcus said, his patience wearing thin. She sees people as transactions, conversations as opportunities to climb social ladders. I'm tired of it. And your assistant sees you as her boss who signs her paychecks, Brandon replied. At least Cassandra is honest about her motives. Besides, she operates in your social circle. She won't embarrass you in front of the Pembroke family or the foundation board. Marcus set down his glass with more force than necessary. Olivia Morrison is more intelligent, articulate, and genuinely compassionate than anyone in our so-called social circle. If you two can't see that, it says more about you than it does about her. Trevor exchanged a look with Brandon before sighing. Marcus, we're your friends. We're trying to protect you from a potential disaster. Taking your assistant to this event is going to raise eyebrows and start rumors. Is that really what you want? What I want, Marcus said, standing and throwing cash on the table, is to attend an event with someone who gives a damn about something other than status and money. If that's too radical a concept for you both, maybe we need to reconsider what friendship means. He left the restaurant without waiting for their response, his mind churning with frustration and doubt. Were they right? Was he setting Olivia up for failure by bringing her into his world? Or were they simply too blinded by their own privilege to recognize genuine worth when they saw it? Back at her small but tidy apartment in Wicker Park, Olivia sat at her kitchen table staring at her phone. She'd pulled up the foundation's website, scrolling through photos from last year's auction. The images showed a glittering crowd of designer gowns, perfect hair, and confident smiles. People who'd been born into wealth or married into it, who navigated high society like fish in water. She thought about Mr. Bennett's invitation, his earnest expression when he'd asked her to accompany him. In 2 years of working together, she'd seen him handle impossible situations with calm determination, but today he'd seemed almost vulnerable. It was that vulnerability that made her want to say yes, even though every practical bone in her body screamed that it was a terrible idea. Her phone buzzed with a text from her younger sister Sophie, who was finishing her marketing degree at Northwestern. Mom says you looked stressed when you stopped by earlier. Everything okay? Olivia smiled despite her worries. Sophie had always been able to read her like a book. She typed back, My boss asked me to attend a charity event with him. Not sure it's a good idea. The phone rang immediately. Of course it did. Sophie never texted when she could talk. Olivia Morrison, please tell me you did not turn down a date with your gorgeous billionaire boss. Sophie's voice was practically vibrating with excitement. It's not a date, Olivia protested. It's a professional arrangement. He needs someone who understands the company's charitable work. Right, because there's absolutely nobody else in your entire company who could discuss charity work, Sophie said with obvious sarcasm. Liv, when was the last time you did something exciting for yourself? Olivia considered the question seriously. Her life had become a carefully structured routine of work, helping their mother with expenses and making sure Sophie could focus on her studies without financial stress. Excitement felt like something other people got to experience. This isn't about excitement, she said finally. It's about maintaining professional boundaries and not embarrassing myself or the company at some fancy event where I don't belong. Or, Sophie countered, it's about taking a chance on something that could be amazing. Liv, Marcus Bennett has never taken anyone from the office to these events, right? That has to mean something. It means he's desperate and I'm convenient. Or it means he sees something in you that goes beyond filing paperwork and scheduling meetings. Sophie's voice softened. You've been taking care of everyone else for so long. Maybe it's time to let someone take care of you for an evening. After they hung up, Olivia sat in the growing darkness of her apartment, Sophie's words echoing in her mind. She thought about her mother, Grace, who'd raised 2 daughters alone after their father died, working double shifts as a nurse and never complaining. She thought about the sacrifices her family had made so she could get her degree and build a career. This opportunity, terrifying as it was, felt like it meant something. Like saying yes would be honoring all those sacrifices rather than betraying them. She picked up her phone and typed a message before she could talk herself out of it. Mr. Bennett, I've considered your invitation. If the offer still stands, I'd be honored to attend the auction with you. His response came within seconds. The offer absolutely still stands. Thank you, Olivia. I promise you won't regret this. As she stared at his message, Olivia hoped he was right. Saturday was only 6 days away, and she had no idea how to prepare for a world she'd only ever observed from the outside. But for better or worse, she'd committed to finding out if Cinderella stories could happen in real life, or if her boss's friends were right and she was headed for disaster. Either way, she was about to discover whether Marcus Bennett saw her as just his capable assistant, or as something infinitely more complicated. The next morning, Olivia arrived at the office 30 minutes early as usual, but her mind was far from her typical organized focus. She'd barely slept, alternating between excitement and sheer panic about what she'd agreed to. The charity auction was in 5 days, and she had absolutely nothing appropriate to wear, no idea how to navigate high society, and a growing certainty that she'd made a terrible mistake. Marcus arrived at exactly 8 o'clock, as punctual as ever. He smiled when he saw her, a genuine warmth in his expression that she rarely witnessed. Good morning, Olivia. Thank you again for agreeing to accompany me on Saturday. Good morning, Mr. Bennett, she replied, handing him his usual black coffee. I've prepared your briefing for the day. You have back-to-back meetings until 3, then the conference call with the Tokyo office. Olivia, he said gently, when it's just us, you can call me Marcus. We've been working together for 2 years. She felt heat rise in her cheeks. That wouldn't be appropriate, Mr. Bennett. Professional boundaries are important. He studied her for a moment, something unreadable flickering in his dark eyes. Fair enough. But Saturday evening, those boundaries are going to blur a bit. I want you to feel comfortable. I'll do my best, she said, though comfortable was the last thing she expected to feel. The day passed in its usual blur of efficiency, but Olivia found her concentration slipping. During lunch, instead of eating at her desk as normal, she slipped out to walk Michigan Avenue, staring at the boutique windows with their impossibly expensive gowns. The price tags made her stomach turn. One dress cost more than 3 months of her rent. She was about to give up entirely when her phone rang. Her mother's name flashed on the screen. Hi, Mom. Is everything okay? Sophie told me about your fancy date, Grace Morrison said, her voice warm with amusement. And before you protest that it's not a date, humor your old mother. When's the last time something exciting happened in this family? Mom, I have nothing to wear. I can't afford the kind of dress I'd need for this event, and I can't ask Mr. Bennett for money. That would be mortifying. Come home tonight after work, Grace said firmly. I have something that might work. That evening, Olivia drove to her childhood home in Oak Park, a modest 2-story house that her mother had somehow managed to keep after their father's death 15 years ago. Grace met her at the door, her salt and pepper hair pulled back in a practical bun, still wearing her nurse's scrubs from the hospital. Mom, you just got off a 12-hour shift. You should be resting. Nonsense, Grace said, pulling her into a hug. This is important. Come on, we're going to the attic. Sophie was already there, having driven from her campus apartment. At 23, she looked like a younger, more carefree version of Olivia, with the same hazel eyes, but an infectious optimism that her older sister had lost somewhere along the way. Finally, Sophie exclaimed. The transformation begins. The attic was dusty and cramped, filled with boxes of memories and forgotten treasures. Grace moved with purpose, pulling out a large garment bag that Olivia recognized immediately. Her breath caught. Mom, that's your dress. From when you and Dad used to go to the hospital foundation dinners. Grace unzipped the bag carefully, revealing a stunning emerald green gown. The silk fabric seemed to shimmer even in the dim attic light, and the classic cut was timeless rather than dated. Your father always said this dress made me feel like I could conquer the world. I think it's time it served that purpose again. Olivia felt tears prick her eyes as she reached out to touch the soft fabric. I can't. What if something happens to it? Then it will have been worn for something important, Grace said firmly. Dresses don't have meaning hanging in attics. They have meaning when they're part of someone's story. This can be part of yours. Sophie was already pulling out her phone. James from my marketing class works part-time at a salon downtown. He owes me a favor after I helped him pass statistics. I bet he could do your hair and makeup. Sophie, I can't ask. You're not asking. I'm telling. Sophie was already typing furiously. This is happening, Liv. For once in your life, you're going to let people help you instead of always being the one who helps everyone else. Over the next hour, they carefully tried on the dress. With a few minor alterations, a tuck here, a hem there, it would fit perfectly. Grace's pearl earrings and a simple silver bracelet completed the ensemble. As Olivia stood in front of her mother's full-length mirror, she barely recognized herself. You look like you belong in his world, Sophie said softly. But I don't, Olivia replied, her voice barely a whisper. I'm pretending. Grace stepped behind her, placing both hands on her shoulders. You're not pretending to be someone else. You're simply allowing yourself to shine. There's a difference, sweetheart. You've spent so long being practical and responsible that you've forgotten you're allowed to be beautiful too. Meanwhile, across town in his penthouse, Marcus was having a considerably less supportive conversation. Trevor and Brandon had shown up unannounced with expensive whiskey and concerned expressions. We need to talk about Saturday, Trevor said, pouring 3 glasses without asking. Marcus loosened his tie and sighed. If this is another lecture about bringing Olivia, save your breath. Marcus, we're worried about you, Brandon said, settling into one of the leather chairs. This isn't like you. You don't mix business with personal life. You certainly don't bring employees to high-profile events. Olivia is more than just an employee. Exactly, Trevor jumped in. That's what concerns us. You're crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed. When this inevitably becomes complicated, it's going to affect your business. Marcus took a long drink, feeling the burn of the whiskey. What if I want it to be complicated? What if I'm tired of keeping everything safely separated into neat compartments? Brandon exchanged a worried glance with Trevor. You're one of the most successful entrepreneurs in Chicago because you're disciplined and focused. This woman, her name is Olivia. Fine, Olivia is going to be a distraction. She doesn't understand your world, and when she inevitably struggles on Saturday, it's going to reflect poorly on you and the company. Or, Marcus said coldly, maybe my world needs someone like her to remind me what actually matters. Did you ever consider that? Trevor stood, frustration evident in his posture. We're trying to protect you from making a mistake. Cassandra called me today. She's hurt and confused about why you choose your assistant over her. Cassandra is a social climber who sees me as a trophy, Marcus said flatly. I'm not interested. Then find someone appropriate, Brandon pressed. There are dozens of intelligent, accomplished women in our circle who would be perfect for you. Accomplished at what? Looking good in photographs? Making small talk at parties? Knowing which charity is fashionable this season? Marcus set down his glass with controlled force. Olivia has built herself from nothing. She put herself through college while working full-time. She supports her mother and sister. She's brilliant, kind, and genuine. That's worth more than all the social polish in the world. You're falling for her, Trevor said quietly, and it wasn't a question. Marcus met his friend's gaze steadily. Maybe I am. Is that really so terrible? It is when it costs you everything you've built, Brandon replied. And it will, Marcus. One way or another, this is going to blow up in your face. After they left, Marcus stood at his window, looking out over the glittering city lights. His friend's warnings echoed in his mind, mixing with his own doubts. Was he being selfish, pulling Olivia into his world? Was he setting her up for humiliation? Or was he finally taking a chance on something real instead of safe? Friday afternoon, Olivia left work early with Marcus's blessing to prepare for the next evening. Sophie and Grace were already at her apartment when she arrived, along with James, a tall, stylish young man with an artist's eye and an infectious enthusiasm. "Okay, honey," James said, circling her like a sculptor assessing marble. "We're going for classic elegance, not trying too hard glamour. Your bone structure is gorgeous, so we enhance rather than transform. Got it?" For the next several hours, Olivia's small apartment became a salon. James worked on her hair, creating an elegant updo with soft waves framing her face. Sophie organized jewelry and accessories, while Grace made alterations to the dress with the skill of someone who'd once dreamed of being a designer. "Tell me about this boss of yours," James said while applying subtle eyeshadow. "Sophie says he's gorgeous and rich, but what's he actually like?" Olivia considered the question carefully. "He's complicated, driven, obviously. Brilliant in business, but there's something lonely about him, too. Like he's built this empire but forgotten why he wanted it in the first place." "And you remind him why?" Sophie asked gently. "I don't know," Olivia admitted. "Maybe I just represent something different from his usual world. Something real. Or maybe he sees what we all see," Grace said, looking up from her sewing. "A remarkable woman who deserves to be cherished, not just depended upon." As the sun set over Chicago, casting golden light through her apartment windows, Olivia began to see a different version of herself emerging. The woman in the mirror looked confident, elegant, beautiful, in a way that felt authentic rather than artificial. "Remember," James said, stepping back to admire his work, "confidence is the best accessory. You're not going to this event to prove anything to anyone. You're going because a smart, successful man recognized your worth and wanted you by his side. That's it." After everyone left, Olivia sat alone in her quiet apartment, the emerald dress hanging carefully on her closet door. Tomorrow night would either be magical or disastrous, but either way it would be memorable. She thought about Marcus, about the way he'd looked at her when he asked her to accompany him. Hopeful, vulnerable, genuine. Her phone buzzed with a text from him. "Just wanted to make sure you're still okay with tomorrow. If you've changed your mind, I understand completely. No pressure." She smiled and typed back, "I'll be ready. What time should I expect you?" "I'll pick you up at 6. Olivia." "Thank you. This means more to me than you know." As she prepared for bed, Olivia realized that somewhere in the chaos of preparation and doubt, her fear had transformed into anticipation. Yes, she was nervous. Yes, she might be out of her depth. But for the first time in years, she felt like she was stepping into something that could change her life, rather than just maintaining the careful routine she'd built. Tomorrow night, Olivia Morrison would walk into Marcus Bennett's world not as his assistant, but as someone he'd chosen to stand beside him. Whatever happened next would reshape the careful boundaries they'd maintained for 2 years. The only question was whether those boundaries had been protecting them or holding them back from something extraordinary. Saturday evening arrived with unexpected sunshine, as if the weather itself wanted to cooperate with Olivia's nervous optimism. She spent the day in a strange state of suspended animation, unable to focus on anything except the ticking clock that brought her closer to 6 o'clock. By 5:30, she was dressed and ready, standing in front of her mirror and barely recognizing the elegant woman staring back. The emerald dress fit perfectly after her mother's alterations, the silk fabric catching the light with every breath. James's makeup work was flawless, subtle enough to look natural but sophisticated enough for the occasion. Her hair was swept up in a style that Grace had assured her was both timeless and modern. "You look like a princess," Sophie said from the doorway, her phone already out to capture photos. "Marcus Bennett is going to lose his mind when he sees you." "That's not the goal," Olivia protested, though her heart fluttered at the thought. "Maybe not. But it's definitely going to be the result," Sophie grinned. "Now let me see you walk. You need to own this, Liv. Confidence is everything." At precisely 6 o'clock, Olivia's doorbell rang. She took a deep breath, grabbed her small silver clutch, and opened the door. Marcus stood in the hallway wearing a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped out of a luxury magazine spread. But it was the expression on his face that made Olivia's breath catch, pure, unguarded wonder. For a long moment, he simply stared, seeming to forget how to speak. "Olivia," he finally managed, his voice rough with emotion. I don't have adequate words. You're absolutely stunning." "Thank you," she said, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "You look very handsome yourself, Mr. Bennett." "Marcus," he corrected gently. "Tonight, please call me Marcus." Sophie appeared behind Olivia, grinning wickedly. "Take good care of my sister, Mr. Bennett, and have her home at a reasonable hour, or you'll answer to our mother." Marcus smiled, some of his usual composure returning. "You have my word. Shall we?" He offered his arm, and Olivia took it, feeling the solid warmth of him through the expensive fabric. As they walked to the elevator, she was acutely aware of how natural it felt to be beside him outside the office, how right it seemed despite every practical reason it shouldn't. The limousine waiting outside was sleek and black, with a driver who nodded respectfully as Marcus helped Olivia inside. The interior was exactly as luxurious as she'd expected. Soft leather seats, ambient lighting, and a privacy partition that separated them from the driver. As they pulled away from her modest neighborhood toward the Drake Hotel, Marcus seemed uncharacteristically nervous. He adjusted his cufflinks twice, a gesture she recognized from 2 years of observing him in stressful meetings. "I should warn you about what we're walking into," he said finally. "The guest list tonight includes several hundred of Chicago's most prominent citizens. Business leaders, politicians, old money families. Some of them will be curious about you." "Curious how?" Olivia asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "Trevor and Brandon will likely make comments. They've convinced themselves that you'll be overwhelmed by the event." He turned to look at her directly, his dark eyes intense. "There will also be several women who expected me to bring them tonight, including Cassandra Whitmore. She's not known for her gracious acceptance of disappointment." "Are you trying to make me more nervous?" Olivia asked with a small smile. "No, I'm trying to prepare you. And I want you to know that if at any point you want to leave, we leave. No questions asked." His hand found hers on the seat between them. "I'm not asking you to endure anything uncomfortable for my sake." The warmth of his hand in hers sent electricity through her body. "Marcus, I'm here because I want to be. Yes, I'm nervous. Yes, this is completely outside my normal world. But I trust you, and I believe in what the Foundation does. That's enough to get me through an evening of judgmental socialites." He smiled, genuine warmth transforming his usually serious expression. "You're remarkable, you know that?" Before she could respond, the limousine pulled up to the Drake Hotel's grand entrance. Olivia could see the red carpet, the photographers, the stream of elegant guests arriving in designer gowns and tuxedos. Her stomach clenched with sudden anxiety. "Ready?" Marcus asked softly. "No," she admitted, "but let's do it anyway." The driver opened the door, and Marcus stepped out first, then turned to offer his hand. Olivia took it, letting him help her from the car with a grace she didn't quite feel. Camera flashes immediately began popping, and she heard murmurs from the crowd of onlookers. "Who is she?" someone whispered. "I've never seen her before," another voice responded. Marcus kept his hand on the small of her back as they walked the red carpet, and somehow that simple touch grounded her. She smiled politely at the photographers, kept her head high, and tried to channel every ounce of confidence her mother and sister had tried to instill in her. Inside the hotel, the ballroom took her breath away. Crystal chandeliers hung from soaring ceilings, and the space was decorated in white and gold, creating an atmosphere of elegant sophistication. Round tables covered in silk cloths were arranged around a central dance floor, and a stage at the far end featured an auction podium and large screens for displaying items. "Marcus, darling," a woman's voice cut through the ambient conversation, sharp with artificial sweetness. Olivia turned to see a stunning blonde approaching in a red dress that probably cost more than Olivia's car. She was beautiful in an intimidating way. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect figure displayed to maximum advantage. This had to be Cassandra Whitmore. Cassandra, Marcus said politely but without warmth. Good to see you, is it? Cassandra's ice-blue eyes flickered to Olivia with barely concealed disdain. I was so surprised when I heard you were bringing a guest. You usually attend these events solo. Her tone made it clear she'd expected to be his plus one. Cassandra Whitmore, this is Olivia Morrison, Marcus said, his hand still reassuringly on Olivia's back. Olivia has been instrumental in our foundation's success over the past 2 years. How? Nice, Cassandra said, her smile not reaching her eyes. Morrison. That's not a name I recognize from any of the prominent families. That's because my family believes in working for a living rather than living off trust funds, Olivia replied smoothly, surprising herself with her boldness. Cassandra's smile froze. Before she could respond, 2 men approached, Trevor and Brandon looking uncomfortable but determined. Marcus, Trevor said with forced joviality. Glad you made it. And this must be Olivia? Hello, Olivia said, recognizing them from photos in Marcus's office. It's nice to finally meet you both. Brandon's eyes traveled over her with obvious surprise. You look different than I expected. You mean I don't look like someone who shops at department stores? Olivia asked sweetly, having overheard more of Marcus's conversation with his friends than she'd admitted. Trevor had the grace to look embarrassed. Marcus may have mentioned that we were skeptical about tonight. I hope you'll forgive our presumption. That depends, Olivia replied. Are you going to spend the evening waiting for me to use the wrong fork? Or can we just acknowledge that social class doesn't determine worth? Marcus made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Gentlemen, if you'll excuse us, I need to introduce Olivia to Gerald Pembroke before the program starts. As they moved away, Marcus leaned down to murmur in her ear. I've never seen Trevor speechless before. That was magnificent. I might have just made enemies of your best friends, Olivia worried. Then they weren't very good friends to begin with, Marcus replied firmly. Gerald Pembroke, the evening's host and chairman of the Children's Heart Foundation, was a distinguished man in his 60s, with kind eyes and a warm handshake. Marcus, wonderful to see you! And who is this lovely young woman? Gerald, this is Olivia Morrison. She's been the driving force behind much of our foundation's community outreach. Gerald's eyes lit with recognition. Morrison, you're the one who designed that mentorship program connecting tech professionals with underprivileged students. That was brilliant work. Olivia felt herself relax slightly. Thank you, Mr. Pembroke. I believe in creating pathways for kids who have the talent but not the resources. Because you understand that world personally, Gerald said perceptively. I did my research when Marcus's company became one of our major donors. Your story is inspiring, my dear. From community college to executive assistant at a major tech firm, all while supporting your family. That takes extraordinary character. They chatted for several more minutes about the foundation's programs, and Olivia found herself genuinely enjoying the conversation. This was why she'd agreed to come. Not for the glamour or social status, but for the chance to support work that actually mattered. As Gerald excused himself to greet other guests, Marcus guided Olivia toward their assigned table near the front of the ballroom. See? You're doing wonderfully. One person doesn't make a successful evening, Olivia cautioned, though she felt more confident than she had an hour ago. Their table included several other tech industry leaders and their spouses. Olivia found herself seated next to Nina Chen, a journalist for Chicago Business Journal who immediately engaged her in conversation about the challenges facing women in corporate environments. I have to admit, Nina said candidly, when I saw Marcus Bennett arrive with someone I didn't recognize, I was intrigued. He usually comes to these events alone or with women who are more interested in being photographed than discussing actual issues. I'm definitely not here for the photographs. Olivia laughed. Good, Nina replied, because I'd love to interview you sometime about your mentorship program. We need more stories about people creating real change rather than just writing checks. As dinner was served, a beautifully plated meal that Olivia navigated without any fork-related disasters, she began to relax into the evening. Marcus kept her included in conversations, never making her feel like an outsider or an accessory. When business associates asked about her, he introduced her as a colleague rather than just his assistant, highlighting her contributions and insights. Between dinner courses, the auction began. Items ranged from luxury vacations to exclusive experiences, and the bidding was spirited. Marcus bid generously on several items, particularly those benefiting the Foundation's medical programs. Then something unexpected happened. Gerald Pembroke approached their table during a break in the auction. "Marcus, Olivia, I wonder if I could ask you both to say a few words about your mentorship program? I think it would inspire more donations." Olivia felt panic spike through her chest. "Mr. Pembroke, I'm not prepared to speak publicly." "You don't need preparation to speak from the heart," Gerald said kindly. "Just share why this work matters to you. 3 minutes, that's all." Marcus squeezed her hand under the table. "We can do it together. I'll be right there with you." Before she could protest further, Gerald was announcing them from the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite Marcus Bennett and Olivia Morrison to share some thoughts about an innovative program that's changing young lives." Marcus stood and offered his hand. Olivia took it, her legs feeling shaky as they walked to the stage. Hundreds of eyes watched them, and she could see Cassandra's smirking expression, Trevor and Brandon's concerned faces, and countless strangers waiting to judge her. Marcus spoke first, his voice confident and clear as he explained the technical aspects of the program. Then he turned to her. But this was really Olivia's vision. She understood something I'd missed, that the biggest barrier isn't just money, it's hope. "Olivia!" She stepped to the microphone, her heart pounding. For a moment, her mind went blank. Then she saw her mother's face in the crowd. No, not her mother, but a woman who reminded her of Grace, looking at her with encouragement. "When I was 16, Olivia began, her voice stronger than she expected, "my father died suddenly. We had no savings, no insurance, no connections. My mother worked double shifts as a nurse, and I worked after school at a grocery store. College seemed impossible. I remember a guidance counselor telling me to be realistic about my expectations." The room had gone quiet, everyone listening. But I had one teacher who refused to accept that. She spent her lunch hours helping me find scholarships, teaching me how to write applications, believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. That's what this program does. It connects kids who have the talent but not the resources with people who can open doors. Not just with money, but with mentorship, guidance, and most importantly, with the message that they deserve those opportunities. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then the room erupted in applause. Marcus was looking at her with such pride and something deeper, something that made her heart race for entirely different reasons. As they returned to their table, several people stopped them to praise the program and offer additional support. Olivia realized that she'd done more than just survive the evening. She'd actually contributed something meaningful. The auction concluded successfully, raising record amounts for the foundation. As the formal program ended and the band began playing, Marcus turned to her with a question in his eyes. "Would you dance with me?" Olivia nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. He led her to the dance floor, and as his arms came around her, she realized this was the moment everything changed. This was no longer just a professional arrangement or a charitable obligation. "You were incredible tonight," Marcus murmured as they swayed to the music. "I knew you would be, but you exceeded every expectation." "I was terrified," she admitted. "I know. That's what made it so brave." His hand tightened slightly on her waist. "Olivia, I need to tell you something. These past 2 years working with you, I've tried to maintain professional distance. But tonight, seeing you shine, watching you inspire a room full of jaded socialites, I can't pretend anymore. This isn't just professional for me." "It hasn't been for a long time." Olivia's breath caught. She looked up into his eyes and saw the truth there. Vulnerability, hope, desire, and something that looked a lot like the feelings that had been growing in her own heart, despite her best efforts to suppress them. "Marcus, you don't have to say anything right now," he interrupted gently. "I just needed you to know. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever complications this creates, tonight was worth it. You're worth it." As they continued dancing, Olivia noticed Trevor and Brandon watching from the bar, their expressions contemplative rather than judgmental. Cassandra had left early, her exit marked by an angry flourish, and Nina Chen was typing notes into her phone, probably already drafting an article about the evening's unexpected inspiration, but Olivia barely registered any of it. All she could focus on was Marcus's arms around her, the way they fit together perfectly, and the terrifying, exhilarating realization that she'd fallen in love with her boss at some point over the past 2 years without even realizing it. The evening that was supposed to prove whether she belonged in his world had instead proven something entirely different, that maybe they could create their own world, one where professional boundaries and social expectations mattered less than genuine connection and shared values. As the song ended and another began, Marcus pulled her slightly closer. "Stay with me for one more dance?" "I'll stay for as many as you want," Olivia whispered back, finally allowing herself to acknowledge the truth she'd been hiding even from herself. Whatever came next, Monday morning awkwardness, complicated relationship dynamics, the judgment of his social circle, they would face it together. Tonight had changed everything, and for the first time in years, Olivia was ready to embrace change instead of fearing it. The ballroom lights sparkled like stars, the music swelled with romantic promise, and in Marcus Bennett's arms, Olivia Morrison finally let herself believe in fairy tales. Not the kind where a prince rescues a helpless maiden, but the kind where two people find each other despite all the reasons they shouldn't, and choose to build something real.